So, Vivek, would you like to go first? You were the first one who watched the film amongst three, four.
No, actually, I would
Four.
recommend Vishal to go first.
Okay.
Sorry to put you on the spot, Vishal. Vishal, pretending to not be there won't work.
Sorry, I had to leave the room. Uh,
Okay.
how can I help you guys? Yes.
Yeah, we'll be starting with you.
Okay, okay. So I have to say something, is it? Or I mean, waiting for me?
Yes,
Oh,
we wanted to start with your initial reaction.
I have to say I like the movie very much,
Okay.
but
Okay.
I have to say on a personal note, I had a lot of issues watching the film because I've been continuously been disturbed for the past couple of days doing one thing or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my movie watching experience would have been better. I don't know whether I'm the right person to talk about it because I saw it piecemeal, but I really enjoyed the movie. It was very nice. It was disturbing and disturbing not in a sensational kind of way, which is the kind of cinema that I respect. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, really nice. I really enjoyed it. It was as usual great recommendation. I quite enjoyed it. I have seen
Uh,
the other. Uh, it's part of the Calcutta trilogy. I've seen the third part of the trilogy, which was underwhelming. Not a bad film, underwhelming, but this is terrific. Like keeping in line with Mrinal Sen's great films,
mm-hmm.
definitely up there. Great film, very nice.
Yeah, so uh, this film was recommended to us by Mr. Kasrawali, and if I remember correctly, Nikhil, I think
Mm-hmm.
we'd already done the curation, right? It was
True, true, true. We
it was ready to
discounted
be
Calcutta trilogy before even considering it.
yeah it was ready to be sent for announcement,
Mm.
but I told Nikhil, just give me a couple hours, I'll watch Calcutta and I'll get back to you, just
Mm.
in case. And the movie turned out to be so great,
Mm.
we had to discuss and debate for hours to which film should move to accommodate Calcutta. So
True.
yeah, I really had a strong reaction, a positive reaction towards the film, because it's how do I put it in words? Because it has multiple stories,
Mm.
and like Vishal had said during the Tokyo discussion, that it's very rare for an anthology film to come together.
True.
And when you watch this film, it doesn't feel disjointed at all.
True.
And mm, my first reaction when I finished the film,
Mm-hmm.
and also when I finished the film today, is that this is one of those rare films, or it might be the only film where you
Mm-hmm.
can feel the director's anger.
True.
So yeah, I found it quite fascinating that he was able to convey that.
Mm.
Kritik.
Um, I have rather mixed feelings. I mean, I thought it's a very ambitious uh, uh, film in what it attempts to do, but it didn't quite work for me at the end of the day. Mm, yeah, go ahead.
Why do you think it didn't work for you?
Again, I'm gonna have to say some very. I'm kind of
No, you can be
sorry to say
brutal about the
cliched
film. Mrinal
lines,
Sen is
but
not here with us.
You should be
Advice
even.
and
no,
advice.
I
because
would feel that he would respect you being brutal.
Yeah,
no,
yeah, absolutely.
no, I because what I'm about to say is very banal and cliched, but I thought it was kind of too disconnected and it was too. it was too formal and too playful, and
Kritik, sorry to cut you off. Disjointed, as in the stories did not go
Yeah,
together.
the three
That was
stories. I think that's what it's talking about.
not only in the stories, but in the way of presentation and the style in which it is done. I mean, there was like maybe two meta scenes where one meta scene where they talk to an audience, and yeah, and the yeah, and these scenes of poverty, of extreme poverty, then uh, 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 follow these scenes of protests, real protests on the streets, and
Yes, somebody's blowing their nose.
is it?
That's me because I
Yeah.
have a bad cold. Sorry.
Oh, Samantha, hi.
That's dedication.
That's making fun of me. Hey, but Kritik, I wanted to say hi. It's been a long time.
yeah, it's been a long time since I've been here. It's glad to be here again. I'm glad to be here again.
Are you sick, Samartha?
I was down with a little bit of like flu like stuff. I got a COVID test done, and
Uh-huh.
luckily it was negative. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
just some seasonal thing.
Okay.
Bangalore is.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah, I think we cut Ritik off. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid I don't have anything new or important to say, but it didn't quite work for me at the end of the day because it was too foreign, and it was too in my face kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Kritik, I wanted to ask you, do you like any surrealistic
Oh,
films?
I definitely do, but
Okay. Or
sometimes
avant-garde type films?
a little bit,
Okay.
but yeah,
How
it
about
sometimes
Godard,
it has to
Jean-Luc
work
Godard?
with what they are trying to do. Obviously this movie is trying to do something
Hmm.
other than just being a movie,
Hmm.
and I think it definitely succeeds in that because it
Hmm.
definitely serves as a kind of a call to action, or or as a it invigorates a person. It's kind of it's kind of difficult to watch the scenes, and they're so moving, but the style in which it was done, and the it kind of felt a little bit uh, it didn't work out for me at the end of the day. I mean, I don't know how else can I say that.
I'll agree that it's not an easy film to watch. I'm with you on that. But that said, watching it for the second time,
Hmm.
uh, I thought it was quite easy um, to interpret what is in there. The first time I saw, I thought you need to pay full attention. But second time I saw it, I thought that even if you're not able to pay full attention, the film is spelling out a lot of details
I
on
mean,
its own.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a subtle film, but subtleties. Obviously, I mean, I'm of the opinion that subtlety is overrated, but it just the whole it's obviously a little bit experimental, and that experimental aspect didn't really work out.
Hmm. Okay.
So I kind of joined late because I had to finish the last 20 minutes, and my head is spinning. I have no clue what happened after the third story. With, some guy coming out of the dark and talking about. I've come. Can somebody briefly tell me like what
Spinning
happened?
in a good way or a bad way?
Like I'm totally lost. I have no clue what the hell I just saw, but it's pretty amazing.
Okay.
I just can't. I can put some pieces together in terms of what that guy who got shot in the park is talking about,
Huh.
and with all the flashback. But
Hmm.
then like some soldiers in the dark with those masks and some
Hmm.
negatives.
Hmm.
Like I have no clue what's going on. But the very first story I thought was beautiful. The
The
the one
courtroom.
that was actually yeah, no, not the courtroom is good. But the one where the leaky roof, I
Oh,
actually
okay.
love the composition of the shots in that. Like
Hmm.
it can stand by itself. I think it's very powerful because it talks about this is actually something that happens here quite a bit, right? Like I've known people to whom that has happened, and the images of how that kept the vessels and uh, and then the roof collapses. It's incredible, powerful cinema in my opinion. Every shot was very well composed. But then with shot number two or story number two, it was started becoming a little bit like okay, this is dragging along. And then by story number three, it was kind of engaging. I think the fact that everything was set on a train was good. But then, like I said, in the last part, I was kind of lost. I don't know what was going on, frankly. Especially with Mr. Banerjee, the party. I thought it's just a juxtaposition of some people living very well and arrogantly talking about a famine. That's kind of that's the image that I thought that he was trying to do because the juxtaposition suddenly became uh, sudden, like he would show people partying and then suddenly images of still pictures of people dying and stuff like that. But then it got too diluted for me. I don't know what was going on after that.
Nikhil, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
What about
So
you?
I expected Mrinal Sen to be a lot more subtle, but I actually started out with Interview. I watched the three films, and I started out with Interview, and Interview was very chaotic, and it seemed at times very juvenile and also confused. So I expected Calcutta 71 to be on the same grounds. In some sense, Interview and Calcutta 71 is at least remotely interlinked. But the first film sort of blew me away. I mean, it was completely a no nonsense short film, and soon after, the subsequent ones were pretty powerful as well.
You're
I,
talking about the
I
courtroom or the poor
so
family?
the courtroom actually has
Is
a
linked to
strong
the
relevance
first
to
film.
the first film. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was worried that because I heard about the interview and I didn't see it, that
I haven't seen the interview either, but what at least whatever you need to know
it's
Yeah,
is
that
shared in the
it
film.
suffices. It suffices. I mean, the film
Yeah.
provides enough exposition.
Mm.
Um I personally like the first short film.
Courtroom.
Uh, hmm?
Courtroom,
No, no,
right?
no, no. Courtroom is I considered it the I mean the first
Prologue.
ground floor of the film,
Okay.
and the first one is the 1933, the family dealing with the rain. The second being the famine, and third being the rice smuggling. I usually expect class films to be a bit more subtle, but somehow with all the image symbolism, it did really drive the point home, and I was very impressed with that.
Nikhil, can you
Mm-hmm.
help me a little bit with when you said the image symbolism? Very
Mm-hmm.
briefly, can you help me with what was going on in the last, like the very last guy who was
So,
talking about?
at least from what I got from the climax, it seemed like the what the rich consider what the whole group of intellectual elites are. So they consider history and art and artifacts to be a part of a status symbol. And uh, talking about the Chandragupta Maurya artifacts and another leather inscribing uh, in one of those in the last film, and immediately moving on to, not immediately but at least slightly immediately moving on to these the history. It seemed like he was trying to point at the intellectual elites as a result of these historical periods.
Okay. But is the band playing in the same location as the intellectual elites?
Sorry.
But
There's a band. I was kind of lost. They are.
Yeah, the band. Yeah, it did seem like that.
what do you
But
think
again,
about the
that is
meaning
quite
of the band
confusing.
being there?
Hmm?
What do you guys think about the meaning of the band? We kept on getting cut
Yeah, it's
into
a good
the band.
question. I thought of them as representing the youth. That's how I was thinking, and the raw energy in
Can
that
I
age.
can I try the band thing? Because
Sure,
Yeah,
go
I know
go
it.
ahead, go ahead.
so I have made a short film. Vivek has seen it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's in the final stages of production.
Mm-hmm.
So there is I I think in the film the band is a tool to, in the end, if you look at the band when it comes and the editing pattern,
Mm-hmm.
so that helps you to the music helps. The I don't think there is any kind of music before, at least any kind of music, chaotic music before the band comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So that is like an oral and visual tying in that happens at the end. But also music is definitely the kind of music a person listens to gives you an idea into the taste of that person. You will rarely find a poor person listening to great classical music or jazz music. So
Was
uh,
this jazz music, by the way?
no, it's not jazz
I
music.
It
thought
was
it
rock
was
and roll.
It
very
seemed like
much
soft
rock
rock.
and roll
It's not
music.
jazz music. Let me
Mm-hmm.
come to what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, sure, sure,
So
sure.
in
Sorry.
my short film,
Mm-hmm.
there is no jazz music in my short film, but there is an idea that is floated in the starting when the movie starts
Mm-hmm.
about jazz music. That jazz has all the secrets of the world. That
Mm-hmm.
is that idea is floated by a pseudo intellectual to a guy who only knows who only knows that if I do this deal, I'm going to have my meal today.
Mm-hmm.
But when that guy listens to that kind of music, something happens to him. So whether or not jazz music is is something of the next level is not the point. The point is it is definitely considered as sophisticated music. So when we come to the end, we were very rightly, Nikhil, I feel that you rightly pointed out that there is a disconnect amongst the classes.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the music comes in, it helps to increase that disconnect. It's a tool to show you that disconnect, and with it also helps in that chaotic edit pattern that happens in the end. So it's just one more layer to what he's trying to do.
And also, interestingly, the clips that are selected for the climax, those are the points where the protagonists understand their status, their class status. When the first film, I mean, the family dealing with the rain, when the head of the family, the father, actually goes to Sarkar's house and notices that he has to spend the same spend time. I mean, he has to stay with the dog he chased away. It gives him a sense of his class status. And the in the second one, uh, it was picked exactly when they started to uh, discuss and started fighting about what their honor, in air quotes, honor status, and their financial status. The
And to add,
third one.
oh sorry,
Hmm?
no, I thought you were done. Go on, go on.
No, no, I was pretty much
No,
done.
no, no, go on, go on, go on.
No, I was just giving the example of the third film. Nothing else. Go on.
So complete it. No, I am sorry. Like I thought you were done.
No, the third film also sort of. I mean, the clipping from the third film also has the same nature. A mother trying to deal with having sent her son to smuggle to provide for her family.
So the great point, Nikhil, about
Hmm.
him. He has to sit next to the dog because
Hmm.
there was this one shot that really I found very interesting because this tells you the economy of shot taking. Is
Hmm.
in that story when this man enters that shed or whatever you might call it,
Mm-hmm.
there is a tracking shot, and it ends on this one person. And uh, when it ends on this one person, and when this guy has to sit, uh, this this guy's place is just next to the last guy. You know, this is this space which is claustrophobic. I don't think I'm making sense, but I can't explain it. But the shot
Mm-hmm.
taking is so smart, like so. What is the word for it, man? The economy of shot taking.
Mm-hmm.
So it ends on
Are
this
you
one.
talking about the first film?
No, this
First shot.
one, the rain one. It
Yeah.
ends
Okay.
on this
Mm-hmm.
one person,
Mm-hmm.
and then this guy comes and he has to sit next to the space which is at the end of this last guy that was shot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so uh, I can't really tell you how it works, but because it's a matter of feeling. But when I saw it in the film, it really affected me. It's like this is very simple, very simple, but it's
True.
still very beautiful shot taking.
True. True. True.
And that's a good point, by the way. Like, I never thought about it. That I was looking at it from another point of view, but this also makes sense. That's very nice.
Mhm. And also, there is an increasing level of class consciousness with the Rain film, the family dealing with the rain. You feel absolutely no sense of anger because you can only feel sympathy for them. There is no antagonist in the film, and there is nobody to point to who led them to that condition. But as the films go by, you can start to notice a silent antagonist, and they become more prominent in the fourth film. Not even in third film. In third film, you get hints of the government and the system being parody and uh, quite against the poor working class, the proletariat. But only in the fourth film you can see the hypocrisy and you can see the uh, uh, you can see how they have actually stood on the necks of the poor working class and made themselves known and risen above them. I'm sorry, I think I cut someone off. I don't remember who.
I was going to say about the dog. I was wondering why he would try to beat the dog. Was it just sadism, or
It usually is a sense of venting out frustration because you can although I mean this is what I've noticed, although patriarchy is uh, prominent in all classes, it's only the lower and middle income classes that are highlighted, and the patriarchy is made prominent only over there because uh, in the upper classes they are free to study elsewhere, and they are free to have that sense of financial freedom, but it is not the same with the middle class and the lower middle class.
With the dog, right?
Mm,
The reason I said I had a different reading of it, but what Nikhil also said is absolutely is bang on. Uh, so let so if you look at there is this upper class and then these guys belong to the lower class, right?
mm,
For them, they are treated as animals, correct?
true.
So and then there are the real animals who are out there. So what is being done to them, they do to the animals, not because they are bad people, but what else would they do? You know. So this 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 is just a tool to bring out a symbolic tool to bring out this aspect.
True. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on the court proceedings and why it started out with the court proceedings.
Mine.
Sorry?
Are you talking to me or like generally?
Everyone. It's a general question. Why did he start with a court proceeding? What are your thoughts on that? Vivek has been silent. I think we can shine the spotlight on him.
Damn it. Okay. uh, so the court scene, no?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. The scene is a make believe set, right? It's not
True.
representative of reality, but they're trying to um, um, put a layer of abstraction over a series of events that you're using as an example.
Mhm.
The case itself is not important. The courtroom itself is not important, and even the characters, the lawyer or the judge, they're not
Mhm.
important. They are seen as how do I call it? A representative of the larger society,
True.
if I can use that word.
Mhm.
And the case is quite simple, no? That there was a riot,
Mhm.
and it and there was also a strike. No, there was a strike which uh, went into a riot,
Mhm.
and due to the circumstances, the defendant's suit could not be picked up
Mhm.
since the laundry was closed, and out of desperation, he uh, decided to become a rioter and steal a suit. Simple case. Then somewhere in the case, the film goes to a complete black
Mhm.
background, and this guy is trying to smoke a cigarette, take a break, and the person who gives him a light is the audience. He
Mhm.
says, right, like, who are you? I'm the audience. And starts questioning this defendant about what he did, why he did, um, and gets irritated and leaves. And the point of doing that is you, as an audience member, are also curious, right? Some crime has been committed. Why has this crime been committed? And so the audience, which is representing us in the film, uh, asks him such questions. And the real question is that I'm trying to remember what questions he asks. Oh yeah, he asks, what was the suit for? Where is the interview? And uh, what were you hoping to get? And things like that. And his answers are something to the line of, it was to get a job and need a job to move up in life and have a stable income and buy a home, buy a car, all that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So the real question is, what did you have to gain so much from that interview that you were ready to become a criminal? And that's the hanging question from that black and white segment. Then it goes back to the courtroom, and they have the mannequin
Mhm.
also in the opposite
Mhm.
stand. That's purely for comedy, right? In
No,
fact,
that was the mannequin he disrobed.
right, I know that's it's purely there for like
Mm.
absurdity sake.
True.
Like, look how seriously they take it, that they
Mm.
even brought the mannequin back in.
Mm.
uh, and the mannequin has a noose on its neck, and when you do a track down shot, they censor
Mm.
his pelvis area. It's
Mm.
quite all silly. It's not serious. Then in this imaginary space, which
Mhm.
is not a real courtroom, there's no floor, there's no walls, but there is a fan, and the fan keeps squeaking. So first time I didn't get it. Second time I saw it, I got it.
Mhm.
So your fan is not working properly. So the infrastructure, the court, like it's not working. The court system is not working. And I thought maybe this is the far fetch. Maybe I'm pulling too far to find an answer here. But this scene ends abruptly. The judge stands up and says, "We're going to take a break, and we shall return later," assuming that he'll get a new date somewhere in the future and he'll come back for the same case. As soon as they break for the day, they go into a commercial, almost like a commercial break. And in that commercial break, I think there's a girl, and she's talking to someone, and they say, "Did you hear about the guy who was found dead on the streets? And when they investigated, he was bullet ridden, like he shot by many bullets, and that's how he died." And then it hit me that so outside this court, there are serious cases like this where there is gross incidents of violence and murder, and but they decide to prosecute a guy who just wanted an interview. So this court scene is criticizing the defendant for not having self-control and not skipping the interview, but rather committing a crime to go to the interview. And it's also criticizing the court system for wasting everybody's time instead of dealing with serious events. That was my reading of the court scene.
So one minor correction over there. He actually attends the interview, but he attends the interview in dhoti.
Oh, really? What happened to the court?
Yeah, he says it, no? That I attended this thing, but what could I do? I had to go for the
Oh, right.
So
He didn't get the job because he was
this
very
was
bad.
from the first
He
film.
attended the interview.
So what does he do with this suit then?
So he loses the suit.
Oh, right. Someone steals it on the bus. That's right.
Yeah. And he gets pissed off that he didn't get the job because he didn't have a suit. Because he didn't dress in a certain code, and he takes it out on the mannequin.
I was at first, so my reading of the first three stories was food, clothing, and shelter. But then I realized that the film is not getting over here, so it cannot be food, clothing, and shelter.
Sorry, what?
My reading of the first three stories was Calcutta 71. In Calcutta 1971, there is a definite problem of food, clothing, and shelter.
Food, clothing, and shelter. Okay.
But then the film was not getting over there, right? So I realized even if this is food, clothing, and shelter, it has to be much more than that. So if you look at, it's very obvious what the film is talking about in terms of poverty giving rise to whatever it is, misery, exploitation. There is definite class difference. All those things are there. Well, I think if you look at it from how books are written, my feeling is these short stories are not standalone short stories. They are taken from, I have a feeling that they are short stories taken from these are literary short stories, not written for film per se. My feeling, okay? So I feel like this is like a prologue and epilogue because the upper class is shown in the first story and the last story. The party and the court, and there is a definite sense of apathy. In the end, it's very obvious. But in the first story, this guy can, there is this thing of the system also, which Vivek pointed out. He could get a job. He could get a job, but he's not really sad about the fact that he could not get a job.
The epilogue is the ghost.
No, both are hai, but it's not a story. I know that it's not the traditional epilogue. I understand, but I'm saying that when the film starts off with this guy who could afford to get a job, he does not get a job, but he's happy with it. He's all right with it. So it was quite interesting. Also, the first story is stylistically very different from all the other stories.
True.
So so there might be something else happening there. So it is definite criticism of the system, 100%, because the judge himself says the whole system is gone, like it's not working well, and then he goes on to but still follows the rule of the court. The there is a respect that is accorded to the court when this guy stands up in the end, like that's the last shot of in the court scene, right? He stands up and everyone stands up along with him.
Hmm.
So you say that the system is not working. It's gone to the dogs, but you still choose to follow it. So there is definite criticism of the system. But how exactly mm, how exactly does it fit into the narrative? I am not really sure, except from apart from the fact that it's the film is also definitely talking about the fact that you are not. He says it's very obviously. He says like I'm 20 years old, but I have suffering of what 1,000 years in me. That's what he says.
Is that it?
There is a
That, yeah,
voiceover.
that's the ghost.
So
That's the
I'm
goal.
20 years old, but my suffering is of 1,000 years
So
of the
that
last.
is the prologue it
Because we
actually.
are not what we are. We are also we carry along with us history, right?
Mm.
So for me, therein lies the clue to all the stories. Well, how do we interpret it is up to us. But for me, therein lies the clue to all the stories.
And Kritik, what did you think of the court scene, and why do you think he started out with it?
Um, I'm not really sure, to be honest. Um, it was kind of making it was kind of ironical and funny to, and even the performances of the lawyers and the judges were
Hmm.
shown in that way. And I felt that the when the audience is talking, I thought the filmmaker was trying to establish a conversation with the audience and try to get them to lower down their guards a bit and have a bit of sympathy and understanding with the character, But
Maybe one thing that we could do is, for example, if you have this, if you could, not you as in not Kritik generally, if we
Hmm.
could define or associate one word with every story,
Hmm.
okay, then I'm very sure that you will get some sort of an answer. For me, for example, the party scene is definite. There is definite apathy. Then the rice smuggler has some sort of loss of innocence, and then there is definitely shelter, food, and in the
Mm.
opening scene there is that the system is a joke. So if you put all of these together,
Hmm.
uh, and we could all do our own exercise with it. If we put all of this together, then there is one strand. But I have this question, like, why is the opening scene stylistically so different from everything else? That is an interesting question. I really don't have an answer to that. But uh, probably if we can, so for me, like when I say like if these one word, if I define all these stories by this one word, by one word, right? So I get a strand of what's happening, which is what we have already discussed.
Okay.
when you mentioned that the prologue quote scene was kind of stylistically different, it also reminded me that the fourth story, which is about the rich people, even that was stylistically different from the other stories. It was kind of rapidly edited, and we kept on getting cutaways to the
No,
background.
but it's not as in the opening scene. If you look at the quote in itself, quote that's not
It's
how
quite
quote.
absurdist.
It's absurdist. That's not how quotes are. But if
Yeah, I
you
mean, that's obvious, but I was trying to
no, you're right. You're
establish
right.
a
You're
connection
right.
between the
I agree.
scenes when he's trying to show the, the what is it, the unprivileged people. It's not that stylized, and it's definitely not mocking them. The characters are, but when we reach the scenes of the privileged people, like the lawyer, the judge, and the rich factory man in the fourth story, the film itself is mocking them.
Yes.
If I can probably take a shot at the answer. The entire film is supposed to be absurdist, at least from what from the way it started and from the way it ended. And the time bubble is completely the boundaries of the time bubble is sent is it's centered in some sense around the courtroom. So all these historical retrospectives are mostly indicating on the result of what has happened from 1933, 1943, and 1953. And a result of all these the accumulation of all these class differences, all the history of exploitation, humiliation, and what is the other one, and one more, what was mentioned in the uh, script there, the text.
Which
So
one you talking about?
I experienced. I'm 20 years old, and I've experienced this exploitation. I've experienced exploitation for almost 1,000 years.
1,000 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been witnessing a history of 1,000 years.
Mhm.
So it seemed like everything was supposed to be absurdist, and
Hmm.
his conclusion of why everything is absurd and why the system has failed entirely
Hmm.
is because of these three stories.
Hmm.
The one in 33, 43, and 53.
Hmm.
And toward the end, the fourth story about the rich people's party, it sort of closes in on the stylistic nature of the first, I mean, the courtroom scene. It's not the same, but it sort of closes in.
When you say the whole film is absurdist, like I'm kind of not able to see like how
It
I mean the
uses
second
exaggerated
story.
elements. Are you asking me to define absurdist, or
No. Like, why do you think it was absurdist? What made you say
so
it's absurd?
it seemed like it, I mean, at least the court scene, it started out by looking like a satirical piece.
I mean, like, court scene is obviously absurdist, and even the factory man is absurdist. But when you say the whole film is absurdist, I don't get it because we get the prostitute story, and then we get the rice bag
No,
story.
those
What's absurd?
stories are not absurdist. The stories dictate why the person, the Ranjit Malik, he reacted in the way he did, and how, despite historical apathy to class consciousness, that is what the court is doing, trying someone over disrobing a mannequin. And you can see the immediate commercial break that Vivek mentioned. You can see that unfolding. You can see how uh, there are a lot more serious crimes happening, but they are more concerned with petty crimes. And that is essentially what is happening even now, at least with what happened with the second wave or the first wave, especially in the first wave. So everyone were pissed over how uh, a lot of these low-wage workers are loitering about, loitering about in air quotes, and a lot of these hmm, younger people just walking about as if nothing has happened. and a lot of them flouting code protocols. But it really pushed the narrative away from central mismanagement of the whole situation.
I think it was a good point what you brought up, but it's kind of interesting to think of the uh, how everything, when you imply that the whole everything about the film is connected to the court scene. It's quite interesting. I didn't. Um, uh, it's a good point. It's a good view.
There's one thing I noticed in
Mhm.
my second viewing, which I could not see in the first viewing,
Mhm.
and this also only happened by the third film, which is the teenage boys traveling by local train.
Mhm.
And we haven't talked about that story yet, right?
Not in detail,
Okay,
yes.
fine. So in that story, you have a bunch of is delinquents the right word? I don't know if it's the right word.
Mm, they were smuggling rice, so you can probably use that with the liberty uh, of not being wrong, at least within the film.
Okay. So, anyways, it's a bunch of teenage boys who basically have nothing to lose.
Hmm.
They don't have food to eat, and they don't have a real job that anyone will give them. So, devil may care attitude.
True.
And interesting thing which I noticed this time is
Mhm.
first there's some I don't know what the word for this person is, but he's some dressed in black. He's a Baba type character. He's
Mhm.
obviously they call him a beggar in the subtitles, but I don't think that is correct.
Mhm.
But if someone knows what such a person is referred to as, please let me know.
Mhm.
Then few minutes later, there's some priest-looking guy who's also looking
Mhm.
for money.
True.
But the first guy gets shooed away, made fun of, and they keep, poking at him, saying that um, everybody, close your nose because it stinks too much. Uh, so even though these guys are in, very um, not much of a great situation themselves,
Mhm.
they found someone to look down to,
True.
and this is something which skipped my mind the first time I saw. Then obviously
Mm.
the series of events takes place. They get into a shouting match with one of the buffer looking guys, and he uses his physical strength uh, to win against these boys. During this time, there is one guy who's eating a jalebi and smoking.
Mm.
Doesn't pay attention to neither the buff guy beating people up, nor does he pay attention to the priest, nor does he pay attention to the other guy seeking money dressed in black.
Mm.
Towards the end, he makes a statement saying that, gentlemen, I've lived a very long life, and I have something to say if you would like to listen.
Mhm.
And he says, day by day, our society is becoming inhumane.
Mm.
And yeah, that was something to develop on, because every story has this evolution of becoming inhumane. The first story, uh, just about the court. Then the second story about the violence with the dog. And the second story, I didn't speak much when you guys were discussing that, because I thought it was the weakest
Mhm.
out of the four films or five films. So I was more curious to hear what you guys have to say. But the violence with the dog, my interpretation was that few minutes ago they were struggling for an inch of dry space.
Mhm.
Now he's out in pouring rain, getting drenched,
Mhm.
just to, feed his ego that
Mm.
I'm the boss here. I'm the one who will show you. Uh,
Dealing with his
correct.
frustrations,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
pushing
Frustration.
the frustration,
So that's a cycle of violence, and that's the cycle of why
oppression, yeah.
someone pointed out being in a dire poverty situation cannot be good for your mental health,
Mm.
and it cannot lead you to live a quality life. And I think Nikhil brought up the issue of patriarchy. That is also, quite correct. That it's such a situation that he wants to remain the head of his little world, and then he's humbled by his situation that he has to go share the shed uh, with everyone he deemed below him, whether it's poor people or the dog itself. And yeah, so and the third story now with the teenager. Um, yeah, one they make fun of this poor guy in black. So even though they are looked down upon by most of the other passengers, they themselves look down upon someone else. And in the end, the buff guy, right, the guy who beats them up, is carrying two pots of food, presumably going to some event. Um, they trip on him and destroys food. So I was thinking about that they have to use something to gain some degree of superiority for them to feel normal or have some sort of um, yeah, the social standing is quite important to all of them in all the stories. Then in the final, not final story, the party story is the same. He talks about, oh, look at this art piece. This art piece is worth a lot of money, and I specifically moved it from my bedroom to the dining hall. Why? To show off, basically. He's saying I put it in the dining room to remind myself of where we come from, but that's all bullshit, because his second line is that all my guests, he names a few people who come to my home for lunch or dinner, their eyes fall upon this work of art and they're left speechless. And before we move on to this story, we were given a small montage of the Bengal famine that happened. So they have taken a tragedy and packaged it into an artwork which can be bought and sold and traded among the elite to show that we do care about this issue. This is why we bought the painting. It's important to us. It's a part of our history. And this guy who is the center of attention in the party, right? Everyone's trying to come and talk to him and all that. But you also see there are people who are bitching about him in the background also. And you get to find out that he's a newly rich guy. He has some factories and he just so turned out that his business is booming and he became rich. So it is, this is all around the world, by the way. Old money hates new money. They're saying something along those lines.
I thought it was his employees who were criticizing him, though.
Employees, but there are also other people in the party. There's definitely that angle also in the film. that he's considered he's trying very hard to
Newly
fit
rich, yeah.
into he's trying very hard to fit into this new society, to seem sophisticated, to have, like, throw a grand party and meet all these important people and talk about interesting works of art, but he's not respected by anyone. And then he talks about. I'm trying to remember what he talks about.
He talks about the paintings, and he talks about how he's disappointed with the state of the country.
Oh yeah, like people are starving. Are we not the same people?
Hmm.
Right? How can people starve, and are we not the same people? Don't we share the same history and culture? So how can I have so much to eat? How can I eat 4 times when they don't even have one meal to eat? And what he says is true. You can't disagree with him. But then you find out through the back channel gossip that he recently shut down one factory because the workers demanded some 3% pay raise. So rather than paying his workers a little more, he found it more fitting to shut down the whole operation. He's prepared to make less money, but he's not prepared to give them a little more money. So maintaining the status
It's
quo,
12.5.
fine, 12.5.
Uh, yeah, sorry, sorry.
He's more interested in maintaining the status quo than he is uh, concerned about poverty. Because he's not.
Mm.
He's saying things which people want to hear. And this is a very common thing with politicians. They'll say things that most people will find agreeable. And that's how they gain popularity. So he's trying to do that. He's trying to gain popularity by saying what people want to hear, which is poverty is bad. Fine, poverty is bad. But is there something that can be done about it? Is there anything that you're doing about it? In fact, he's doing everything he can to make sure poverty keeps going on.
Mhm.
Because people would not protest, people would not strike if their current wages provided them a good living. Forget good living, a simple living. People riot when their basic expenses are not met.
True.
I forgot who it is, but uh, I know some market research people
Hmm.
dealing with the stock trading world.
Hmm.
They pay close attention to the prices of wheat
Hmm.
all around the world.
Okay.
And it's a strange thing, right? Stock market and wheat, what is the correlation?
Mm.
They say they monitor the price of wheat because if the price of wheat goes up and
Hmm.
becomes unaffordable,
Hmm.
it is a historical given from ancient times like Roman, Greek times.
Hmm.
When people cannot afford food, they will riot. When they will riot, they will destabilize the current uh, government or monarchy.
Yeah, marketplaces.
Yeah, they'll destabilize the ruling class.
Mm.
And what emerges out of that ruling destabilization, nobody knows. So
Mm.
your operations are hit, economy will fall, a lot of things will happen just because people can't afford food.
True.
So when the prices of wheat goes up, all these uh, people who can afford big market analysts and all that, they start
Hmm.
selling the stocks, start pulling out liquid funds from uh, these
Various
markets.
investments. Mm.
Mm,
It's interesting.
mm,
On an interesting side note, on the last point, I on in China, actually, pig is pork is seen as is a culturally important food, and it's seen as a kind of it used to be seen as a kind of luxury. So, and it is a well-known fact that the government takes extra measures to make sure that pig is available year round to the people, no matter the situation in the country. And I think they have like 1,000 ton like what do you say, a pork emergency storage unit and all. It's quite crazy. And one more thing that Vivek brought up was that how even though that painting, it might have been made with a purpose, but now it's, it's a property of someone else. And I mean, you can say that paintings are now like seen as investments or prestige things and whatnot. Really glad that hasn't happened to film.
No, it's commoditized, commercialized, bought and sold. So none of these people at the party experienced a single day of the famine issue, right? Whereas in the rest of the stories, they're like dying for leftover water from boiling the rice.
Hmm.
So, but they're wearing it like a badge that, oh, Bengal famine.
Virtue
I,
signaling,
I
huh?
I really empathize. It's quite sad. It is quite sad, but it's not something to show off your social standing with, which is what that guy is doing by hanging it in his dining hall.
Hmm.
So yeah. And then the ghost, right? Which
Yeah, that was very distinctive.
hmm,
And I mean, it was trying to reflect on individual and personal thoughts
hmm,
as a result of their economic and material conditions. But
hmm.
using a blank void and a head, it was quite bold, and it was probably at that time very ingenious as well.
They probably pissed a lot of people off also, no? Like what the hell is this?
I could imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a lot of. This is what actually
I
struck
really
me
enjoyed the
in
lighting
very
of
different
that.
ways. True,
I
true,
know
true, true.
it's a black thing with a side lit face, right? It's easy. You might think it's easy, but in that scene, he
Mm-hmm.
walks forward
Mm,
and the light stays on his face
true,
because if they had a bigger bank of light, then his shirt would have been lit, but it's
true.
not. And they didn't have digital tools to select his head and make everything black.
Which was
So
actually quite interesting.
yeah, the lighting
How,
of
how,
that is
how did you
Do you
spot?
think he was moving or whether the camera was moving? I was a little bit
No,
confused.
he was moving.
he
The
comes
camera
forward. Yeah,
seemed pretty stable.
yeah. Camera moving will have some judder
Hmm.
to the image.
You can see it when the cameraman is running
Yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah.
I think it's
I
probably
was
in
a
the
little bit
third.
confused for this scene. I didn't know whether he was walking or whether it was a camera, or maybe it's both. So yeah.
So interestingly, this was a stylistic element borrowed from the first film in the trilogy. This is what Ranjit Malik actually. This is how Ranjit Malik talks toward the end, and that is borrowed and used on a lot of different people. But
Yeah,
Vivek,
I
do you have more to add on the lighting? Because it seems very interesting, and it struck me right now. And
yeah, they're using two lights. That's my
Mhm.
guess as of now. I will watch that
But
again.
I think we could notice if there were two beams of light striking face. Don't you think so? And you could see the moving.
You can
You could
always
see the
stop the
beams.
camera down.
Hmm?
You can stop the camera down, like choose a small ref stop, T stop.
Oh, okay.
Uh, so it's either two lights or one light is manually being moved uh,
Mm.
side to side. One of those two
Mm.
solutions. Um,
I
and
thought it was the latter.
hmm.
From I mean, at least from I just watched it
But
once and.
his face does get dark when he's moving, which is why I think
Mm.
it's two lights. It's
Mm.
goes darker for a few seconds before getting bright again. So anyway, that's not so important.
Just a side thing, I also wanted to ask one more thing. Whenever there was a close-up, the camera was like continuously like tracking every single individual
mm,
movement of the faces.
that's
I
a
was,
mistake by the restoration team.
yeah, I was thinking
So
whether it's some upscaling or something.
no. So this film was scanned, right, digitally.
Hmm.
So depending on the quality of the source, negative or interpositive or final print, the print may not be stable. And if you're old enough to have seen films projected in 35 millimeter, you might remember that the image bounces up and down on a very minute level on the screen.
Hmm.
That's because the reel is being pulled down, projected, and then pulled down again 24 times. So that causes the image to shake a little bit on screen. In digital projection, we don't have this problem. So that completely depends on the state of the reel, how worn down it is, or uh, how intact it is. Because you might have seen on a film strip there are square holes on the side.
Yeah.
If they remain in good shape, then your registration is clean. That means you'll have a stable image. But if the film has been watched many times, those the sprockets, the holes, will wear down over time. So the registration will not be so tight anymore. It will be loose. Because of that, the image will vibrate a little bit up and down. So these guys scanned the film, and most films are not stable when you scan them and play them back. And ideally, what they're supposed to do is use either the frame or the sprocket as a stabilization point. But some new guy in the restoration team, he used the person's face as a stabilization anchor.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking some AI thing because my phone
No,
also
there's
does
no
that.
AI. There's no AI. It's just that
Yeah, but I
they were
missed
supposed to
it.
stabilize the whole frame, but they stabilized the face. So
Hmm.
it's quite a stupid mistake.
Hmm.
But I'm sure it will be rectified in upcoming
Okay.
years.
Is that whatever you were describing? Is that the same thing as warping in the image?
No,
Okay.
warping is
Okay.
something else.
Okay.
Warping is you're changing the shape of the image.
For
This is
with
just
respect to film restoration, right?
warping. You're talking about the reel itself warping.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Is
that's
this
a very complicated problem. No,
okay?
this is not warping.
Okay, okay.
No, this is not warping. So going back to that final segment of the ghost, I wish Samartha was here because he wanted to know a little bit more about it.
Hmm.
Mm, you see like some images of protest, right?
Yeah.
And he says, I'm trying to remember what he says. Maybe I should play the film in the background.
He
Some,
says the basically from what I remember, he says
how long
what?
will you protest? Something like that,
Okay.
right?
From what I remember, I mean, I only remember a fragment, but whatever he said was the intertitle that came in between, where
Hmm.
I've lived for 20 years, but I've seen thousands of years,
Hmm.
and that poverty, humiliation.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Right. So it seems this problem is not new. It's not unique to Calcutta in the current year, which is 1971. It has been around um, for a long time. And this guy is one in the commercial break, which takes place in the first story in the courtroom. He's the one who died, ridden by bullets,
Hmm.
and his death is the story which was ignored uh, by everybody, and you see the people who killed him are policemen, but they're all wearing the same mask.
True.
That means you've anonymized them in one way, but you've also made them free of identity. That means they're taking the role of a policeman. They're not a unique individual anymore.
Hmm.
Uh, this is commentary on um, You can call it police brutality, or even in the army. Um,
It's usually associated with uh, police collusion with the system
do you guys remember the
because.
Nuremberg trials
Hmm.
with the Nazi?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so they put all these people into trial, right? So there was a conversation
Hmm.
And they
that,
say I just follow orders, right?
sorry,
And they kept on saying, many people kept on saying, I just followed the orders.
yeah, I just followed the orders. I'm not, I didn't make the decision to kill them, but I had to do what I had to do to keep my job. So in this question, who do you prosecute? Do you prosecute the officer who gave the orders, or do you prosecute the guy who had the gun in hand? So it's kind of referring to that. That here are the guys who are just following orders, anonymous policemen. Are they responsible for his death? So who's the real person who killed them? And you can't see their face. So one of these policemen killed them, but we can't see his face. Um, so yeah, that's what that was about. I'm trying to remember what else does he talk about, because I remember there's a lot of scenes of protest, and that fine, you have poverty, you have uh, famine and all these things, you have unemployment, and you
The
protest about it. And yeah.
immediate back and forth with
Mm,
the protest and the
mm,
ghost talking, it seemed like he was trying to capture the emotion of the time.
mm,
And incidentally, I actually
mm,
looked it up. It was when the Bangladeshi Liberation War happened,
mm.
and there was a huge influx of
Immigrant.
Bangladeshi immigrants.
I
Sorry.
see. Okay. Right. You're right. Yeah.
And additionally, there was also CPI LM upsurge,
Hmm.
and there were a lot of violent protests.
Hmm.
So ML, Marxist Leninist, is a banned terrorist organization.
Okay.
CPIM is a nationwide party.
I see.
I was kind of reminded of the ending. I mean, just because it's scenes of protests and it's a quick montage sequence, and because it's at the ending, it kind of reminded me of the Battle of Algiers.
Battle of, oh,
Yeah,
that's a
that
nice.
was a good film. Yeah.
And incidentally, both of them spoke about the same kind of revolution, although they had their ideologies a bit. Their ideologies were a bit different.
I mean, I'm
So
not saying there's probably not any thematic relevance, but maybe he
no,
got the idea
there is a
from.
lot of thematic relevance.
Uh, I mean, that was about what colonialism and terrorism and the fighting for independence, and this one is more of a kind of uh,
Colonialism
system of
and
oppression and how we,
so
yeah.
with Marxist interpretations of history or the communist interpretations of history, what you actually find for the most part is a class difference. And there is the aristocracy that was the monarchy and the aristocracy that was in the beginning. And as the industrial revolution sped up, you had the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The proletariat was the working class, and the bourgeoisie were the uh, ruling class. Not essentially the ruling class, but the ones who managed to get most of the profit.
What I was moving more along the lines of Battle of Algiers is more
No,
intent
you're not
upon how
wrong.
the oppressors were of a different nationality, and they were, there was a clear line of oppressors and oppression, and this one is more of a kind of
So
uh,
it
kind
would
of
it
a
wouldn't be
northern
any different if
society
the
kind of thing.
oppressors were from a different country. The system of oppression is essentially the same. You would need to develop a sense of economic uh, deprivation to the lower class, and only then would they be sort of subjects to you. And this is also what happened with a lot of historical, at least Marxist interpretations on the caste history as well.
Well,
But I think we are
Marxist
diverging.
interpretation wise, it might be true, but I just think in terms of both of the films, they were not tackling the same matter.
No, they were. They were mostly because colonialism also indicates the same kind of systemic oppression uh, uh, a capitalist system would. I mean, I'm speaking purely. I'm purely reflecting Mrinal Sen's thoughts. Not that he said these exact same words, but he's a private Marxist. So I'm just reflecting on what a typical Marxist thinks.
Yeah, I know even Gillo Pontecorvo, the guy who
Mm.
directed Battle of Algiers, is also a Marxist. But
Hmm.
um,
You had
in
different oppressors, but you did not have a different system for oppression, which is why colonialists and the current uh, bourgeoisies seem pretty much the same.
Can I interject on an off
Oh,
topic?
please do, please do, please do.
Uh, it's not related to what you guys are talking about, but
Hmm.
the word bourgeois, no,
Hmm.
it's I know it's colloquially used to talk about rich people,
Hmm.
but from uh, I guess 15th, 16th century
Hmm.
in France, bourgeois actually meant middle class
Hmm.
back
True.
then. So this is yeah. So the aristocrats used to look down at the bourgeois.
Hmm.
For some reason, the meaning of the word has transformed into rich people, but the etymology of the word, going back to uh, many,
Aristocracy declined, and bourgeois were the next. I mean, bourgeois were essentially the next in the
the
hierarchy.
new money, the new rich.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
I think that is the same case with Varna as well. So Varna was essentially made to distinguish between the Dasas and the Aryas, and it slowly turned into uh, an occupational differentiation.
hey, we didn't talk about that uh, story with the widows, right?
Which one? Oh, the second one.
Is it? No, it's the third one.
Yeah,
Third
I keep
one,
mixing that up. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
third one is supposed to be the teenagers, right?
No,
No,
this
no,
is
no.
before the
Don't
teenagers.
follow by enumeration. So let's make it universal and keep the first
No, it doesn't
story
matter.
to
We're
be the.
talking about the widows and the
Ah, okay, fine. Mm-hmm.
visiting guest, the cousin.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, like I mentioned earlier, there was an increased sense of class. I'm sorry, I think I'm using a lot of communist terminology.
That's fine. It's something
Yeah,
new to
okay.
learn.
Okay. So there was an increasing sense of class consciousness. And with the first story, you didn't really have, like I said, there wasn't really an antagonist. Although uh, there are a lot of people, and there were a lot of communities that were contributing to keeping the family poor, and which is why they had such horrible conditions, especially during rain. So in the second one, you had uh, it was a man-made famine. It was an artificial famine, and you had people to blame. And this is at this
Churchill.
point. Sorry. Yeah,
Churchill.
Churchill. So you slowly start to understand that there are people who are profiting out of exploiting the proletariat, the lower working class. And it's not made too evident in the second film, but you have, I guess, two exploiters. One is Haridas, or what's his name?
Who's Haridas?
Uh,
The neighbor.
Nino. Yeah, the person who keeps exploiting the two women
Oh, the
as an
guy on the
alternative.
first. upper floors, right?
Yeah, the
Oh,
mess.
I don't know his name, but I get what you're saying.
Hmm. So
Hmm.
you get a sense of disjointed exploitation. It's not. It doesn't come off system. It doesn't come off really as systemic, but you have pockets of exploitation here and there, and it seems justified because it's not something really serious, and it's not something everyone should get worked up on. And it's only the second film that we start to make sense of these people who are making money out of these people and who are exploiting their honor, exploiting their labor, and giving them peanuts and making thousands of rupees back in the day.
Was that guy her client, or was he a pimp?
He's
Because you
neither, I
call him an
suppose.
exploiter, right?
Yeah,
Or not?
he was not. So the setup was they give him sexual favors, but they wouldn't have to pay rent.
No, but I wasn't it mentioned that the owners left for a while, and owners were not in town and they gave them the place? Am I misunderstanding?
No, Minu keeps visiting the mess. No, that is where.
But she also
Uh,
got that 1 rupee, right?
hmm.
Hmm.
True, true, true. Maybe
I
the setup is a bit more sophisticated than I think I picked up, but she makes it very clear that they're not paying rent mostly because they are, you know, giving sexual favors instead of
Hmm.
actual money.
The elder sister is also involved in some of this activity.
She is, she is, she is,
Uh-huh.
and it was mostly her mother who pushed them
Correct.
into it.
Uh, uh, yeah.
And I think this is also the point where ethical differences might probably spring up. Some might blame the mother, and some might blame the landlord. But if there is blame on the landlord, it is it is considered mostly an isolated incident. But if it's blame on the mother, then they're probably reflecting on the honor aspect a woman is supposed to protect.
Hmm. Okay.
Because I don't think they're doing anything. I mean, they are providing labor,
Hmm.
and this kind of exploitative labor is no different from any other kind of exploitative labor.
But these girls are put in a position where they they didn't want to do it, but they were made to
Essentially,
proceed with it.
essentially slave labor in a nutshell.
Huh. Okay.
They toil in fields for hours together without any kind of hazard pay or any kind of
Hmm.
insurance, and they probably work to clear off a debt they might have taken some years ago.
Hmm. So you're saying this story is an allegory to slave labor?
Mm.
Okay.
And how these economic conditions push them into it.
Hmm. Then what about this visiting guy?
Visiting guy, he seemed more like he seemed more like us. He was an audience
audience service,
because
huh?
hmm, because if you notice, we don't really see his face all that often. Even when he's on the train and he's having a conversation, it seemed like he was a prop there, and his face was shown only when it was absolutely necessary.
Hmm. Okay.
And there was not much liberty to show his face all that often as the other characters over there.
Hmm. I didn't. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is interesting because I didn't read it as an allegory, but
Hmm.
now that you say it, I should revisit it and think along these lines when watching that sequence again. So I simply read it as, so he says, right, he's very close to his aunt. Basically, it is implied that they all grew up together, and his aunt was
True,
almost like a mother figure to him, which is why he's so um, candid with her within moments of meeting her.
Mm.
Same for the sister also.
Mm.
Even though they've met after a very long time, they seem very uh, close
Mm.
just by their conversation. And I thought that, yeah, this guy considers himself as a family member and he's come to meet them. But actually, what he's doing is he's getting a he's reading the temperature of where they stand
True.
now that things have gone south.
True.
Oh,
True.
how are
True.
you managing the expenses? Oh, how does she go to school? How do you afford this? How do you afford that?
Mm.
All kinds of questions which he doesn't need to know answers to.
Typical
And
Indian relative, circa 1943.
no, even circa today.
True. True. True.
And
Since 1943.
once the relations reach a boiling point
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of uh, unspoken information is spilled out,
Mm-hmm.
then he gets uncomfortable and he's like, I just gotta go. That's all he says and he leaves.
True.
So he's come to see how they are, but when he really finds out how they are, he doesn't want to deal with the problem. He's concerned enough to say that, hey, I don't think this is the right neighborhood for you to live in.
Mm.
Since the girl is growing up, not many good people around here. So that concern is genuine. I understand. But to live in a better neighborhood, you need better income and circumstances to afford food, which they
Mm.
currently don't have.
True.
It doesn't offer any solution to that.
True.
He's just there to remind them that, hey, you should be doing better. But how do you do better? No idea. Just like you said, Indian relative. Um, and once the ugly truth comes out, and
Mm.
like you said, they're doing some work and they're earning their money. If they don't have a problem, why should anyone uh, interject?
That's true.
But it seems they do have a problem, so I don't know how to read that.
It
I
it
do need to
seems. Mm.
see once
Mm, go
again.
on. Go on.
Yeah, go on.
It also seems like the what's his name, the character, the relative, is somehow is some of the audience imposed in him, because we are familiar with the Bengal famine. We know what happened. We have seen pictures,
Hmm.
countless pictures of near skeleton children.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I think what you mentioned in the beginning of the conversation, this was a very personal film to him,
Hmm.
and that anger is reflected
Hmm.
in these circumstances.
Hmm.
It seems like he's pointing at our inability to do anything, despite about what 50 lakh people dying purely out of starvation,
Hmm. Hmm.
and this is not even counting those who died indirectly from the
Hmm.
famine,
Hmm.
and the countless lives misplaced and forever scarred purely because of the war.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's interesting. I mean, not not complimenting myself, but
No, no,
the
you're right. I was just thinking about what you said. That's
Yeah,
why.
yeah, you're complimenting the
no, I
film.
it seemed like I said something and I'm calling it interesting.
Yeah, I do want to revisit this segment again. And it's the longest
Hmm.
segment of the film.
True, 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 true.
So I want to revisit again with the new information that you've shared with us. So thanks for that.
No
Uh,
problem at all.
but I think that's about it. I had what I had to say.
What
What
did
about you
you
guys?
think of? I actually had a brief question. We were talking about the ghosts and the
Hmm.
blank void and the head purely sticking out, purely the
Hmm.
head sticking out and talking.
Hmm.
What did you think of the stylistic choice over there? It seemed like it was a reflection. I mean, it was a reflection of a single person, of an individual, based on his material conditions. But what did you think of that? It was a very bold stylistic choice, and like I mentioned earlier, a lot of these class-driven filmmakers make very subtle nuanced, takes, and they visit very ill thought of, not ill thought of, but very uh, the least thought aspects of poverty. So, for example, in Thai Sahib or in Parasite, Girish Kasrwali and Bong Joon-ho, they talk about the aspect of smell, and it is seen, and this nuance is seen as to reflect the poverty of these people.
Hmm.
So, Mrinal Sen was very bold in that sense. Even Satyajit Ray, I don't think he would have tried something like this.
Satyajit Ray. He's done a few experimental ones, no? I'm trying to remember.
Something, I mean,
Nayak was experimental.
but Nayak was not something like this, no?
No, no, not to this degree, but
Hmm.
it had segments of surrealism
Hmm.
within it, and that was also very well done. That's my favorite Satyajit Ray film, Nayak. No,
Oh,
second favorite,
oh, your first favorite being Aparajita?
Aparjito. Yes.
Hmm.
Second.
So I
No,
wanted to
so
know
you're
what you
asking
thought.
why this style choice, right?
No, I want to know your thoughts on the choice. The choice of style seemed very apparent from what he did, but what did you think of it?
Mm, I thought he was limited in its technical tools
Mm-hmm.
to really portray what he would have wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe with a bigger budget or better production value, he could have used some optical effects, or even with old special effects technology, there are ways to really portray um, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I can understand making an art house film is not easy. You have to make sacrifices to put the film together. So this is like a creative workaround. You want to show a ghost? Fine, we'll show a ghost. This is how we can do it. So
Yeah, the sacrifice compromises become a feature of the film.
how do you mean that? I didn't get
Um,
it.
it becomes a like it is what it is. It's a choice that is taken, the compromise taken. It's I was like, I would like to give the only example that comes to my head at this moment is like Saijin Suzuki films. Like, it's completely weird and odd, and it has huge empty sets, but that was because he had a low budget, and he worked it into his films, and made it and made them very surreal.
Hmm. Okay.
Like, at the end of the day, the compromises don't reduce the quality of the films. It is a part of the film, you know.
Interesting.
Hmm. Okay.
And by the way, am I the only one who watched the other two films? I think Vishal had mentioned that he had watched
He's seen
uh,
Padatik, he said.
Padatik. Oh.
Don't think he's seen
I
Interview.
This is my first Mrinal Sen.
Oh, you should definitely watch. I mean, both of you should definitely watch the other two films. It
You
has
were
a,
unimpressed by the first film, right?
yeah, I was unimpressed, but
Oh.
considering the trilogy, it would make sense to watch the first film as well.
Hmm. Okay.
It seemed very confused.
And how about the third film?
Third film is very good.
Okay. And this you obviously you liked, right?
Hmm? Yeah,
This
this one
film,
definitely.
okay.
Yeah, this one definitely.
Okay.
The third film is mostly about how the ideology, the communist ideology, is misplaced with the current generation. So it's a story revolving around uh, a revolutionary, a current revolutionary, uh, who lives with his father, who was also a revolutionary, but in the pre-independence era.
Hmm. Okay.
So two different generations trying to battle it out.
Okay. I think I've said just about all I had to say about this film. Do you guys have anything else to add?
No, no.
Nikhil?
Sorry.
Uh, yeah, I think I'm about done. Like, I don't have anything else to add. Did you have anything else to talk about? Or should we wrap up?
No, no, I think I'm pretty much done as well. I haven't watched his other films. This is in the 1970s era. I think he has went through a stylistic change in the 80s and 90s. So I think it would be fair to talk about him only after I've watched at least two or three films from those eras.
Okay. In that case, let's end the live stream.
Sure. Kritik, what about you? Did you have
Nothing.
anything?